tell us when you're ready.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Kellyanne, the full House expected to vote on impeachment in 24 hours. Does the president at this point think his impeachment is all but inevitable?
Well, they've been trying to impeach him since before he got elected, and while he got elected, and while he was being sworn in. So I think people, when haters are hell-bent on doing something, they find a way to do it. The question is, at what cost to them? The polls are going in the direction of the president. Kristen, you see these polls among independents, according to Quinnipiac, which has never been a very Trump-favorable poll. Quinnipiac reported just yesterday, I think it was, by a margin of 58 to 36, independents are against impeaching and removing the president from office. That's a real change from when this all started, and at least the independents were saying, hey, let's do the inquiry, let's see where the facts lead us. And they've led us to a very partisan, very petty place, which is a bunch of Democrats, and very disappointingly, including in the Trump-Pence districts, having to go back home and explain a vote that is against the will of the people they represent. If their title, their day job is representative, they're failing in that regard.
Very quick follow-up. The president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, back in the headlines. He is saying that the ousted ambassador to Ukraine was standing in the way of his investigations into the Bidens. Is Rudy Giuliani helping or hurting the president?
Well, the president addressed this briefly yesterday. He said Rudy's he's been his personal attorney. I assume he still is. And on this,
Kellyanne,
he was asked
Rudy
yesterday.
Giuliani is helping or hurting the president?
I think that Rudy went over to Ukraine and has not yet completely briefed the president as to what he found. But I would remind you of something that I believe Ambassador Yovanovitch admitted under oath as well, which is the president, any president, Kristen, has the right, if not the obligation, to have the people in place that he believes best serve the country and the diplomatic interests at that moment. I think she was a month or two away from coming back to the coming back as the ambassador anyway, and I believe she got her full compensation. That's what I've been told. We can check it out. And I thought she was fine in her testimony. I have nothing disparaging to say about her, except that I would remind you of the relevance of a sitting vice president trying to get a prosecutor fired while his son was sitting on the board of an energy company. I think that Hunter Biden had zero energy experience. I think Joe Biden has zero energy, but I think that Hunter Biden had zero energy experience, and all but admitted that in an odd ABC interview a few months ago. And so when you have the Vice President of the United States pressuring a prosecutor and bragging about it in January of 2018 to the Council of Foreign Relations, we can roll the tape anytime, and I wish you would more often, bragging, I told them, you got 90 minutes, I'm on the tarmac, and if you don't believe me, call Barack, they'll tell you.
Why is Rudy Giuliani the one to investigate that? Why not the DOJ? Why didn't the president put it in the hands of authorities here? Why Rudy Giuliani?
The DOJ's been investigating plenty of stuff. They've been super busy exposing what Jim Comey, a renowned liar and leaker, was forced to admit, not under oath, but forced to admit on TV this weekend, which is that he regrets and he thinks they made errors and he screwed up, but he did that after you all gave him the hero's welcome, kill the fatted calf, roll out the red carpet, roll out the red, selling his book, giving six-figure speeches. And yet there were at least 17 errors that were identified in the IG's report. And Comey had to admit that there were problems along the way. But those complications had real implications. Kristen, we had a 2.5-year investigation, put the country through that. A lot of those same Democrats who are now going to vote for impeachment were running on the fact that we need checks and balances in Washington, D.C. because the president is colluding with Russia. That was a big lie peddled by many responsible, otherwise intelligent people. And so we'll see what happens, but I think people who are so pro-investigation ought to just allow this to unravel. God bless you. Unravel, as we say God in our briefing room. God bless you. And unravel and take it where it leads. I mean, what is everybody afraid of with the Durham investigation, the Horowitz IG report? If you want to put facts first, let's see the facts. Okay?
You said that you have nothing disparaging.
I'll be right there, Joe.
You said that you have nothing disparaging to say about Ambassador Yovanovitch, but Rudy Giuliani is saying that he forced her from her job because she was corrupt and obstructing justice.
I have nothing personally disparaging.
But does the White House believe she was corrupt and obstructing justice? And would it be better this week for the White House if Rudy Giuliani wasn't giving these
The White House hasn't said that, and I've already answered the questions on Giuliani if you have any more. And I get a little tired of people not showing. I get a little tired of people, particularly on Twitter and elsewhere, sometimes in your pieces, not showing the former mayor of New York the respect he deserves for bringing this country through our darkest days after 9/11.
Does the White House
and
disagree
being a
with his
fantastic mayor
assessment
there.
of Ambassador Yovanovitch's job performance?
Well, the president has a right to have whatever ambassadors he wants there, and Ambassador Yovanovitch admitted that. I think the big question, as goes Ukraine and corruption, involves a company called Burisma. I don't choose who sits on the board. I don't choose if President Trump had no visibility into authority, responsibility to allow Burisma to forego experience and qualifications and how they selected certain board members several years ago and what they were paying them. That was up to Burisma. But the idea that you have President Zelensky successfully running on an anti-corruption drain the swamp in Ukraine platform, and the President of the United States congratulating him in April and then in July after the parliamentary elections on exactly that, and this becoming the biggest deal, and yet the real corruption, as you know, existed before that. It was seen as one of the most corrupt countries, and people said that the guy running Burisma, the Ukrainian running Burisma, was corrupt. It was an open secret, according to some reports. So why is that not your focus?
But are you saying the White House does not believe she was corrupt in obstructing justice?
I'm saying that the White House hasn't said that, and that I think that you're putting. And I'm just curious, are any of those in the articles of impeachment? Because I don't see them here. I'm not even sure why the testimony was relevant in the end. I'm not sure why we were lectured by law professors about extortion and bribery and the Constitution and quid pro quos. I haven't heard anybody in here speak Latin in a while. Where did all that go? I mean, is there ever any shame? Do you ever wake up with a little bit of trepidation, let alone regret, anybody in this room, of saying, gosh, for 2.5 years, we helped put the country through an investigation. Now for 2.5 months, we've done the same thing. I know how smart you all are. I know you work super hard to be in the White House press corps, super hard. You're at the top of your game, top of your careers. But ladies and gentlemen, my goodness, if we're going to share joint custody of this country as the White House and the press, I have to say that we've got to be able to give the people what they want. And according to the USA Today poll released yesterday today, they don't want impeachment. It ranks number 11 out of 12 issues posed to them as to what influences them and what they care about and what matters to them in 2020. It's number 12 out of 12 to Republicans, and it's number 11 out of 12 overall. The Democrats said, quote, healthcare, gun control, education, the economy, immigration, Social Security, all the issues the president wants to work on. So let's, again, if we're so focused on impeachment this week, and that's so important, I told the president about 6 or 8 weeks ago that I noticed out in a gaggle on a Friday that I got 2 questions about impeachment and I got questions on everything else. And I said, it's very telling to me. I think the White House press corps, as smart as they are, doesn't want to do this. They were wrangled into having to cover Russia collusion nonsense for 2.5 years. I don't think you want to do this. I think you want to move on to the issues that animate America.
Okay, I had a different question, but
Joe, go.
But you did raise the issue of Yovanovitch, and that testimony was presented to us as raising the issue of a thing of value in exchange for an official act. The official act being getting rid of the ambassador.
You're going to have to quote the testimony to make that allegation to me in this room. Since quid pro quo is not even in the articles of impeachment, and nobody testified that there was. In fact, Sondland testified a quid pro quo was about a meeting that ended up happening in UNGA in front of the whole world, literally, that same month. I think it was Walker said they abandoned the idea of a letter to focus on the actual aid. That was very smart of him because they got the aid. They got more aid than President Obama ever gave them. They have cyber rifles and javelins as we speak. They're fighting all the aggressors with the aid the U.S. that we all funded as we speak, including the major aggressor, Russia.
So my other question is about how the president...
That one didn't go well. Let's get a good one.
How is the president going to be spending the next 24 hours? Tomorrow he's going to the rally, but I guess the pressing question is whether and the extent to which he's going to be coordinating with Senator McConnell and others on his defense as this thing moves forward.
Well, that's been a small part of it, and it's actually his White House counsel that is doing most of that, as well as he should be, in terms of what is the timetable, what are the rules. We're excited to be part of the process because we were shut out of the process completely in the House, particularly with that first nonsense exercise of depositions in the bowels of the Congress. Well, the President of the United States was not allowed, but you and I would be allowed, thank God, in any court under due process, Joe, which is to have his attorneys present to present and challenge witnesses and evidence. We weren't allowed to do that, so we'd be allowed to do that in a full and fair Senate trial. I do have to say, because as I was upstairs in my office before coming down here, you have some people on CNN talking about how irrelevant Jeff Van Drew is. Literally, former Press Secretary Joe Lockhart saying, oh, you know, we've given him too much attention, he's not important. How is it unimportant that, reportedly, for the first time in 10 years, a member of Congress is going to switch his or her parties, go from majority party to minority party? That's usually not the way the switch operates. I was here in '94 when they were all switching the other way. Going from the majority party to the minority party because the party left him. He's not leaving the party left him. It's a big deal. And I think it's indicative of what's going to happen as goes voters when they're watching this impeachment.
Are you reaching out to other Democrats to try to get them to switch or go on the record or whatever about it?
Well, I don't think that's an important conversation. In terms of what the president is going to do the next couple of days, I happen to know he's going to do the next couple of days, and all I would say is stay tuned because it's pretty exciting.
Kellyanne over here real quick. Kellyanne.
Pete, and then I'll get, yes.
Will the president sign the spending bill that the House is expected to pass today, $1.37 trillion, and what does that say about the effort to rein in
for the wall?
spending?
You mean for the wall?
The spending, I mean the...
$1.375 billion for the wall?
$1.37 trillion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking just about the wall, because that's in there, and they didn't mess with his authorities at all, which is great. What a difference a year makes. A year ago, they said that it was a manufactured crisis at the border. Now we have money and authorities. Did you move on from that?
Fiscal conservatives, right? Republicans usually are trying to send the deficit the other direction. Instead, it's ballooning the spending here. 1.37 seems to be a lot.
We think funding the military, which is depleted and was under-respected and under-resourced by the last administration. We think the $700 billion plus third consecutive investment in our military is a very wise investment. We have the third consecutive pay raise for the military in that spending. We have the NDAA reauthorized. We have paid family leave. We have Space Force, the first new branch of the military since 1947 or so when the Air Force was founded.
It's all new spending. Is that what Republicans will support? And will the president sign it?
The president is poised to sign it and to keep the government open. And I want to tell you something. When I hear there's a manufactured crisis at the border, and when all of you repeat the talking points from a year ago, when Pelosi was itching to become the speaker and Schumer was sitting there just listening to her and out there in the sticks just listening to her and not saying a word in the Situation Room as well, where we were in meetings, to call a manufactured crisis at the border, where kids are being recycled and trafficked, where drugs are pouring over and coming into communities where your kids and my kids live, is a complete disgrace and a falsity for all of those of you always hyperventilating about facts first and fact-checking. Go check the facts about the crisis that we have at the border, particularly with the drug. If the president never even mentioned a person, never even mentioned the word illegal immigrant or alien or people at the border, if he never mentioned a person, he'd be within his rights to get stronger border security, because 95% of the heroin comes over that border. Fentanyl comes over that border. The meth labs in Mexico are on 8 cylinders now. And so to call it manufactured when people are dying in this country, we have a war right here, and it's called the drugs. And so I know you just want to go over, just gloss past the fact that a year after they called it a manufactured crisis, the president is getting $1.375 billion for his wall, and they didn't mess with his authorities at all.
Kellyanne,
Can you give us an update?
There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Kellyanne.
Blake, and then I'll move around.
Thank you. The president, in the past, has gotten involved with certain companies. GM comes to mind. I'm wondering if the president feels a need at all to intervene with Boeing, given the recent news with the 737 plane. Does he have any plans to talk to Boeing leadership as this crosses?
Well, you know, our administration has talked about Boeing and met with Boeing previously. Boeing went to Capitol Hill to testify as well. So the president is always monitoring that. He wants to make sure that airline passengers here are safe, and that is a first priority. But there again, if you want airline passengers to be safe, sure, you look at the MAX, but shouldn't we also be looking at the infrastructure package that Nancy Pelosi huffed and puffed and tried to blow our house down here and walked out, you know, from the infrastructure meeting? I do not deal with staff. I only talk to the president. And she left before we can discuss infrastructure, which included reforming our air traffic control system, which was built for 100,000 annual passengers, and now we have close to 1 billion annual passengers. You pass that piece of infrastructure, it makes the runway safer. It makes less hassle, certainly, but just safer for all of us. So, but they're busy impeaching the president.
Does the president feel a need, though, to get involved with this company at this time?
Well, Boeing knows the president is watching. He's met with them. Obviously, the Defense Department has met with them. The Department of Transportation, I'm sure, has met with them. And when you say he intervenes and gets involved, it's to protect American interests. I know GM wants a tax credit, for example. I'm sure he'll weigh in on that. He has talked to Mary Barra. He's tweeted about different things GM has done. The president got involved, and Lordstown, Ohio looks much better for its auto workers now, and frankly the auto manufacturer there. So but look, the overall trade deal, that's going to help places like Ohio, but safety first when it comes to airlines.
Kellyanne, can I ask you about on the campaign trail, the free Medicare for all is a popular topic, but so
is it though?
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
at
Elizabeth Warren had a plan for that, had to explain her plan, and she's been sinking in the polls ever since.
And to that point, there are a number of people who have also been talking about free community college, free 2 years. Does the president have a position on that, and would the White House support something like that?
The president does have a position. We actually have a working group here, and I've met with him several times about college and the cost of college. But they're offering free stuff, and he's offering freedom. And freedom means that you get to choose where you'd like to go to college, and we think that the way college is funding, we think that the fact that these college students are forced to pay for fields and facilities they'll never use. The C-suite is doing very well at every single college and university that I've noticed, and so we think. Thanks for mentioning community colleges, because we think that's a great investment for many people. Not everybody is 4-year college material. Fantastic. I wish I had skills to be a welder, a carpenter, a mechanic, a hairdresser, all these things that people graduate with a skills certificate and a high school diploma or a community college degree and go out and support themselves and their families for their entire careers. This is a president that's dignifying all types of work choices. We think that's never been the case. But look, saying that I'm going to absolve everyone of their college debt, everybody can go to college for free, is just like Medicare for all. It's just like the Green New Deal. Someone else is going to pay for it. And people in this country are smarter than that. They know that. We think that the cost of college has gone out of control. I have the statistics. We read them to the president. The cost of college has exceeded, if you just look at how it's spiraled, it's exceeded the cost of other durables and consumables. And it's a big bite. And people feel prohibited, really. They feel intimidated and then prohibited from allowing their kids to go to colleges and universities that they've been accepted to because of the cost. We think that's a terrible conundrum for so many young people to be in. I had 6 figures of college and law school debt, and that sometimes you just have to do that because you're going to earn out later on. But we just want people to have choices. And in this economy, with the job robustness, folks can skip college, they can go to 2-year college, 4-year college, get a postgraduate degree. We want to offer them freedom. But we know that they're smarter than to believe that somebody who promises you free college, free health care, free cars, free year supply of Cheetos if you want them, and they'll say anything and do anything. She can actually use a plan for that might help her get back in the polls. She's not my problem. Charlene and then Hans. Your NBC folks got to know.
Will the president endorse or campaign for Congressman Van Drew?
So we'll see what happens. I know Congressman Van Drew is a Democrat who's going to vote as a Democrat against impeachment, and then we'll see what happens. But let's get through Wednesday and the vote, because history will show that Nancy Pelosi lied about bringing the public along. The public has gone in the other direction, and the public in Adam Schiff's district has gone in the other direction. He's being shouted at, don't impeach, you're a liar, in his safe blue district. So in the district, Congressman Van Drew's district, where I grew up, where I went to St. Joe's in Hamilton for 13 years, worked on a blueberry farm there, own a home in Ventnor, New Jersey, Atlantic County, where he is the congressman. I love the people of that district. And I love the Democrats, the Republicans, the independents. But Congressman Van Drew is actually voting his conscience. He said on October 31st, when he voted against the impeachment inquiry, that so we're going to impeach your president, he'll never be removed, and then you'll have had a failed impeachment, and we won't have worked on, and he mentioned prescription drugs, veterans, infrastructure, health care. Those are the things he mentioned. And so if he wants to work with the president on those issues, we welcome that. But I would just say about that, stay tuned. We're not thinking about politics right now. We're thinking about the fact that unlike Nancy Pelosi's lie, her stated promise to have the impeachment be bipartisan. It is not bipartisan. The only thing bipartisan about impeachment will be the opposition to the impeachment.
Kellyanne, I wanted to ask you about whether or not the president is favoring a short or long trial, but given your love for the 2nd Congressional District, would you ever consider running?
Oh, good God, no. Let Congressman Van Drew and whoever wants to serve the people of New Jersey. I think it is. And look, you've got two other members of Congress in New Jersey, who are freshman Democrats. Josh Gottheimer, who represents Alpine, New Jersey, where I raised my children before we came here, and you've got Mikey Sherrill. That's the Frelinghuysen district. So these districts were held by Republicans for a long time. They're there now, and they're still on the fence. And I think they're watching what's happening back in Rochester, Michigan, and California, and when Elisa Slotkin, I'm going to vote my conscience. I'm going to read all weekend the Constitution, blah, blah, blah. And she's getting shouted down now in these town halls. So they must be watching that because they haven't come out yet and said that they're going to follow their leadership over a cliff. But I love my job here.
Are you guys in favor of a short or a long trial?
So I think the length doesn't matter. I think protracted or quick, long or short doesn't matter as much as full and fair. And I can make an argument for both. Full and fair means you have many witnesses. It goes on for a long time because we need to relitigate what didn't happen or litigate for the first time what we were denied and deprived of in the House, Hans. But I can make the argument that because the 2 articles of impeachment are so thin and specious and weak, obstruction of Congress and abuse of power, which Jim Comey clearly has committed, that we can go pretty quickly too. You can buzz through those pretty quickly. So it can go either way. I'll be back here. 1 second. Go ahead.
I've got a question about Hunter Biden. There's a paternity suit in Arkansas. We've been covering it in Arkansas. Most of the major media outlets have been ignoring it. Do you think if the defendant in this case was related to the president instead of Joe Biden, that the case would be ignored?
No, the case would not be ignored. It would be front page news. You would all be camping out in Little Rock, I'm sure, or wherever the lawsuit has been filed. But again, the people see that. And they don't, we're not going to really have a conversation about incomplete or unfair coverage. I think people see that going on right now with the impeachment. But I also want to repeat, in case some of you weren't here, I don't think all of you really want to do this, want to cover this. You've got a big portfolios. You're smart people who've worked your way to the White House press corps. Who really wants to do 2.5 months of impeachment after 2.5 years of Russia collusion?
So, weeks ago, you and other officials have been saying, you'd be open to White House officials testifying in the Senate where it would be a fair trial and more familiar process. I know yesterday you said Mulvaney and the OMB officials in Bolton, as requested by Schumer, shouldn't need to. So what's changed here?
Well, let's see what the process is. Let's see what the questions are. In other words, what's changed is we were told bribery, extortion, quid pro quo. What was the other nonsense? Collusion, the Mueller report. Finally, the Democrats agree with us. The Mueller report, the Mueller investigation, the Mueller testimony is completely irrelevant. That is just amazing that they couldn't even just append at the end the Mueller report. Just stick it in there, make it a footnote. They couldn't even do that because they were worried about losing these Democrats. Stop calling them moderate Democrats. They're now going to be Democrats who voted for impeachment, not infrastructure. And they're not going to be Democrats who voted to remove a democratically elected president instead of working on health care with us. That's what they'll be known as. But let's see what happens in the trial. We haven't even gotten there yet. I don't know what the format is. They're working on the process, the timeline, etc. But why in the world should we be asked to fill in the blanks that the Democrats created? They created these huge holes and canyons in the presentation of their case. It's not up to us to help them fill in the blanks and make their case. They failed to do that. They failed to bring the country along.
On North Korea,
I'll be right here.
Can you comment on this proposal by China and Russia to ease UN sanctions on North Korea?
To do what?
To ease UN sanctions on North Korea.
Well, we're not easing U.S. sanctions on North Korea. I could tell you that. The president's keeping sanctions in place. And we need to see full and verifiable and irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. The president has made that very clear. And if it's not there, the sanctions will remain.
Kellyanne, undocumented workers and drivers license. President Jimmy Morales, and is the President Trump worried about corruption in Guatemala?
The president is concerned about corruption everywhere, including in Ukraine, particularly in the past. I'm very happy that the new president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, is in the Trump mold, as President Zelensky said on that famous July 25th call. I had learned from you, draining the swamp, rooting out corruption, etc. Now, as Guatemala, we're very happy that the president of Guatemala will be here today, and the president has been working with Guatemala on many different issues, but most recently as one of the Northern Triangle countries. He's been working on, excuse me, trying to make sure that the people of Guatemala know what they're being lied about from the coyotes and others, the traffickers, is not going to be delivered here. That you can't just come to the border of the U.S. and expect to make it over, so don't give away your life savings and possibly worse, and don't trust your children with these coyotes. But there are many, we could talk about economic development with Guatemala, and we're just very happy he's here. I mean, this is the president as the president. They're impeaching the president, and the president is doing tremendous counter-programming, about to keep the government opening and sign a major package. Met with the president of Paraguay last week, and now Guatemala today. I just got NATO to cough up $500 billion in dues all told. Has the funding for his wall and the spending package without his authorities being touched whatsoever, being affected whatsoever. We have the NDAA, we have Space Force, we have stock market highs again just yesterday. Stay tuned, maybe it'll happen again today.
Can we expect any agreements today?
Possibly, but we'll see. I mean, the president doesn't pressure these individuals into signing an agreement when they're here, if that's scheduled, if it's time, if it's ripe. But he welcomes them as guests, and he welcomes them to the People's House, to the White House, as the leaders of their respective countries, and we're very happy that he is here.
President Trump, I wanted to know, what was President Trump's response to undocumented workers and getting driver's licenses? That was a recent news story.
Where?
Forgive me, but
it's been going on.
The issue about undocumented workers and driver's licenses.
Well, if you have a driver's license, you're actually not an undocumented worker. You have a very important document. You have a driver's license.
Kellyanne, a question about moderate Republicans, not Democrats.
Yeah, that's an oxymoron.
Has there been any...
moderate Republicans, I'm sorry, yes. There are many of them, but they're all voted against the impeachment inquiry, and they're all expected to vote against impeachment.
Has there been any outreach to senators such as Susan Collins, Cory Gardner, Mitt Romney?
We talk to them routinely.
About how they may go.
We talk to them routinely. I spoke with Senator Collins, not about impeachment, of course. She was here at the congressional ball with her niece, and then she had a lovely conversation with the President and the First Lady. You saw Senator Romney sitting between the President and me at the e-cigarette roundtable a couple weeks ago here in the White House, and the cameras were in the room. Senator Gardner was here the other night as well, I believe, with his daughter. I saw at the congressional ball. So nobody stopped getting him in the corner and saying, listen, how are the land chops this year? Do we have your vote? We're respectful to our people. We're not strong-arming people the way apparently the House leaders are dealing with their caucus.
I'm curious, is there any concern at the White House that they may go along with some of these calls for witnesses?
There's zero concern at the White House. There is zero concern at the White House that the Senate has 67 votes to remove the president from office. Everyone knows that. Chuck Schumer knows that. That's why he reemerged from wherever he's been and is making irrational, irrelevant demands of witnesses from the White House. He knows full well there aren't 67 votes in the Senate. There probably are 67 or 51 votes in the Senate for infrastructure, for DACA, for immigration reform. There are probably 57 votes for prescription drug or drug pricing reform, 51 votes, and he knows that, which is why he's now gotten on the merry-go-round roller coaster ride of impeachment. He's hopped on this never-ending ride. But that's not. We certainly are in touch with those members of those members of the Senate on any number of issues, but on this, the magic number is 67, not 51. So I'll leave it at that.
Is the president going to watch the proceedings on the House floor?
I don't know. He hasn't been watching much. He hasn't been watching much because you've seen where he's been. In fact, I happened to have be in a meeting with him on Friday morning, and when I walked out of the meeting, I noticed the Judiciary Committee was voting, and we were in a room with no TVs. And so we keep him apprised. But is there anything? I think that the biggest non-surprise in 2019 is what's happening in these hearings and what's happening on the floor and what's happening in the vote. That's been a preordained add water and stir result for a very long time. Yeah. Hi.
Anything on this, the super PAC funded by, or started by your husband as
Is it funded by him?
I'm sorry?
Is it funded by him? Is that the New York Times article?
Launched that came out.
You got to be more articulate. Start over. I know you want to get him in there, but go ahead. Who's running it? Who else is involved?
Excuse me, John Weaver, Rick Wilson, all of these conservatives.
Keep going. Steve Schmidt, John Weaver. So presidential campaign managers who failed.
What is your reaction?
Who never got where I got.
What is your reaction to
running a presidential campaign successfully. Never thought much about including me in their efforts, and thank God they didn't. I don't really have a reaction except to say the New York Times seems overjoyed every time they can write a puff piece that includes certain people's names. They covered some group last year that hasn't really taken off. They covered some Republican primary opponent to the president that none of you give the time of day to anymore, I've noticed. So I think people show their hand. It's kind of disappointing to see some of the people involved, but not surprising because they ran presidential campaigns and were involved in other campaigns, which wouldn't include George Conway. As he says in the article, he's not a political consultant or a fundraiser, even though you've tried to make him both over time. And he said he's not, so I'll just quote him. But other people in that group are. They certainly are. And they failed miserably. They never got a president elected into the White House. I'm sure that hurts very much. But they never really accommodated the growing Republican Party and understood how to beat Democrats. And we did. We beat the queen bee of all time, who was going to make history as the first female president. So I think people are motivated by any number of factors. I do see some other people on that list who I've known for a very long time. And I'll say I'm curious but not concerned.
Kellyanne, I'm sorry if you already addressed this, but will President Trump sign the 2020 spending legislation?
Let me just make clear, curious about those, quote, Republican consultants, curious as to, well, curious just because I know them, but not at all concerned because I know them.
Yes, could you address whether the President will sign the 2020 spending legislation?
Yes, I already addressed that. You can roll the tape. Anyone else?
Yes, could I ask Kellyanne this?
Any interest in my work here?
Could I just ask about the spending bill that the President is poised to sign? It involves the Caesar Act, which would impose sanctions on people involved in Bashar al-Assad and Syria's administration. Has the President said anything recently about Syria? I know there's been back and forth.
I haven't discussed Syria with him recently, but I think he could not be more clear. And that's great to hear about the sanctions in the spending bill. He's very happy with what he's learned. The final contents are expected to be of the spending bill, and he's poised to sign it. Includes that and many other things I've already reviewed, like the military pay raise, $700 billion plus, the third consecutive $700 billion plus investment in the military. It includes NDAA. We're reauthorizing the NDAA, paid family leave, Space Force. The wall is funded to the level that was already committed last year, following the Democrats lying about a manufactured crisis. Then they put $1.375 billion toward the so-called manufactured crisis. Wink, wink. And they haven't messed with his authorities on the wall at all in the spending package. Jen, hi.
Kellyanne, any update on vaping at all that you can give us?
E-cigarettes, which is different. Yes, we actually had a meeting about that yesterday, and the FDA now has a new commissioner. Commissioner Hahn was just confirmed. So I think Commissioner Hahn and Secretary Azar will probably come together and issue the guidance in due course. Any update on whether reporters like you at Bloomberg are able to criticize your boss, Michael Bloomberg, or any of the other Democratic candidates? Any update there? No update. Great. Thank you. I'll take that as a no.
On Andrew, does the President have any plans to meet with him?
Again, you mean?
Yeah. Does he have any plans?
Well, we know that Congressman Andrew is very busy. We know that he's busy watching all of his many of his Democratic colleagues now criticize him, call him a traitor, say he's not that important, it's irrelevant, he's really Republican anyway. He's actually a Democrat who was endorsed by the Democratic Congressional Committee last year in the primary. He was their guy all along, and they spent millions and millions of dollars in the state of New Jersey to flip a lot of those House seats, including the Van Drew House seat, the open seat. He was a state legislator in New Jersey as a Democrat the entire time for about 15 years. And if he flips parties, as he's expected to do, as he has, I guess, indicated to his staff, I'll leave it there, that'll be the first party flip in 10 years in the Congress. It is a big deal. And when Justin Amash became an independent, you all covered it like it was the second coming. You couldn't get enough of it. So I certainly hope that you'll cover the big deal of a Democrat switching Republican over impeachment and over the fact that he has said his party has left him. He hasn't left his party. And may I add, he's going from the majority to the minority. Party switches usually go in the opposite direction. I was involved in the 1994 elections, and people switched parties beginning in 94 and 95, from Democrat to Republican, minority to majority. It takes a ton of courage to go, a real profile and courage to go from majority party to minority party. But it's unbelievable how Democrats and media, I repeat myself, and people on TV today are disparaging Congressman Jeff Van Drew, who is still a Democrat, but he's busy this week voting as a Democrat against impeachment. Then we can talk to him.
Okay, but to highlight your work here at the White House, Kellyanne, what would you like to do as far as?
No, I was just wondering why I'm always asked about George and he's never asked about me.
I want to ask about you, about your opportunity to highlight your work here.
No, everybody sees my work here. I don't need to highlight. I don't need to begin a sentence with the word I just think I'm just watching. I'm just watching.
Senator Graham was in Afghanistan yesterday and said the president was going to make an announcement this week about pulling out U.S. troops. Is there an announcement coming this week?
I'll let them. I'll keep it there, Darlene, and let them make any announcement. Anyone else?
Kellyanne, I don't know if you addressed it earlier, but what can we expect from the meeting with the president of Guatemala?
I already addressed it.
Thank you.
We're glad he's here. We're glad he's here.
Thank you.